So, hello everyone. Today I want to answer questions that were asked earlier about how to get out from under the influence of the Christian egregor, and also talk a bit about the rite of baptism itself. I'll share some of the experiences which Nadezhda Sasoneknaya shared with me and explain how she knows what she knows, instead of just stating facts without context. And I heard these experiences in this video from Nadezhda, and I am passing them on. I decided to do this because some people say, you're telling us something, but not how you know it, so yet I figured I'd mention these 2 points from the perspective of my own story. I'll tell you how I personally interacted with this egregor, including what happened during my own baptism. Yes, I was baptized, so I'll explain how I later cancelled that ritual. I'll also discuss how not to cancel the ritual, because if you do it incorrectly, it might backfire. Not all methods are equally useful, and we'll talk about that today. Many of you who subscribe to the Sun Club or follow me on my website may have already heard parts of this story because I've mentioned it there. Still, I hope there's something new for you here, perhaps details of my biography you didn't know. First of all, I was baptized at a later age, not as an infant. Often, they baptize very small children who are too little to resist, maybe 1 or 2 years old, so they just get carried off to the ceremony. In my case, no such ritual was performed until I was 12. In fact, my mother, whom I really appreciate for this, said she didn't want to impose any particular faith on me. She preferred that I grow up first and decide for myself what I wanted. There was also family pressure on both sides. One side wanted me baptized. The other side wanted something like the Muslim rite. I'm not entirely sure what the correct term is. But my mother held them all off, so no one's preference prevailed. That's a separate story, anyway. Until I was 12, nobody performed any rites, so by the time I was baptized, I was old enough to be very aware of what was happening around me. I could track my own feelings and states. Plus, at that age, I could already see subtle things quite well. I've told you before that ever since early childhood, I've perceived spirits, the deceased, and so on. By 11, I was already managing these energies, seeing and sensing them quite vividly. Given all that, let me say I realized this Christian egregor was very determined to catch me. I saw clear signs of it. For instance, the gymnasium where I studied was Orthodox-Oriented. So every morning they made us all gather for certain rituals. Nowadays, I know some schools have replaced that subject or changed it, but at my school, it was mandatory. Once a week they teach us orthodoxy-related lessons, telling us who was who or how certain figures and saints came about excess, but in addition, they actually herded us together before classes every single day and took us to a mini chapel on the school grounds. We had to stand there for morning prayers. There was a priest present all the time. Some days there was extra excitement, like when they had an icon streaming mirror or something like that. On those days, they didn't send us to the chapel in the morning, but otherwise it was a routine. So I say again, this egregor was really hunting me. That was a very intense period of indoctrination. When we stood in the chapel, I always felt strong magical energy behind the prayers, like actual spells. Whether you call it prayer or a conspiracy, in the magical sense, you can see all the components, particular words, key, a lock, elements that reminded me of typical spellwork. Recently, I discussed in the Sun Club how magic works, how spells work, etc. That might interest you if you want more details. Anyway, when we'd stand there at these mornings, Iranian gatherings, I remember once the priest asked if I was baptized. When I said no, he replied, "Then you have no right to recite these prayers." He warned me that reading them anyway was nearly a crime. That was shocking, partly because we were forced to go in there, so if it was criminal, why did they make me do it? Also, if any of us kids asked too many questions in those religious lessons, we'd just get shushed or scolded. It wasn't just me, other classmates got the same response. There was never a coherent explanation. It was basically, stop asking, go talk to the principal, or some other way of shutting us down. That's the environment I was in. Around the time I turned 12, my mother began having these strange, frightening dreams in which a demon-like being was supposedly hunting me. She got scared and eventually decided we needed this baptism ceremony for my protection. At 12, I wasn't resisting it much. I didn't think about it deeply. I didn't see it as a big threat, at least not until after it was done. During the ritual itself, I remember feeling really bad. It is a magical ritual, after all. They cut hair, burn certain things, recite words. It's a strongly magical process. If you compare it to other forms of witchcraft, you see many parallels: hair, personal objects, etc. Many black magic or voodoo techniques use bits of a person's hair, nails, or bodily fluids because it's part of your energy. So yes, baptism is not just sprinkling water. It's a complex magical rite. I recall that as I stood there, time seemed to stretch forever. There was a little child nearby who was crying. I felt dizzy, nauseous, and off balance. It felt like I needed to leave, but I forced myself to remain. Then came the most disturbing moment. I was immersed in water, fully submerged. I've seen other adults get baptized, and usually they're just partially dipped, but I was completely dunked under. The priest literally grabbed my hair and shoved my head under. It felt like I was fully underwater, not just my face. And I know that in dark practices, water often serves as a portal. I've mentioned before how some of the lower realms are watery in nature. Meanwhile, the Ganges River in Hindu culture is also a massive portal, where people immerse themselves for ritual purification. There are many parallels in different traditions. As soon as I went under, I felt I was dying. That was the sensation. I was drowning, losing my life force. When he finally pulled me out, water mixed with some oil got into my left ear, so I couldn't hear out of it. But more than that, I felt deaf on a subtle level. It was as if I had lost some of my extrasensory hearing. I panicked. I thought I would never again hear my guardian angels, never see or sense spirits, never perceive the subtle realm the way I used to. I was crying hysterical. My mother tried to calm me down, but then we were made to continue. We had to do communion, eating the flesh and blood, said the bread and wine. I just wanted to run away. By the end, I ran out of there in tears, traumatized by the sudden feeling that I'd gone deaf and blind to the subtle world. If before my sense of subtle reality was 100%, now it was maybe 30%. That was a massive, horrifying change. Right after that, a neighbor scolded my mother. He was someone with deep perception as well, and he told her point blank she should never have allowed any religious ritual to be performed on me. I realized, too late, how right he was, but at that time, the ongoing pressure at school and my own youth led me to go along with it. Almost immediately, I thought, I need to cancel this ritual. I need to undo what just happened so I can return to how I was before. But as soon as I had that thought, the egregor started bombarding me with terror. It insisted, you now belong to us forever. There's no way out. You can't return to your true home. You're ours. All this fear-mongering. But I was determined. And in the end, I discovered it was actually pretty easy to break away. I could have done it the moment I stepped out of that building, just by snapping my fingers and stating my intent. In my next video, I'll share exactly how to free yourself from any egregor and break any ritual contract. But for now, let me wrap up by highlighting my personal observations from this experience. Firstly, let's talk about losing my subtle senses. See, after baptism, I felt as though I lost about 70% of my ability to hear and see in subtle realms. I felt deaf and blind. Secondly, let's discuss feeling owned to right away. It was like the egregor treated me as its property. It openly said, no, you'll do what we want. You're ours. It's a master-slave dynamic. Thirdly, let's explore no true truths. Some people say, you can negotiate with this egregor and live peacefully. From my experience, that's false. Even if it pretends to bargain with you, it's all lies. All it really wants is your energy, especially the energy of suffering. Fourthly, let's consider the suffering cycle. So people strongly connected to this egregor often experience of sicknesses or hardships. Not always, but it's common. If you watch carefully, you see the pattern: constant tribulation, pain, or disease. Fifthly, Let's talk about continuous energy drains you after the ritual. There's a perpetual thread between the person and the egregor pulling energy toward it. Some say it provides protection, but in reality, the egregor simply doesn't want other egregors poaching. It hits people. It offers minimal defense, but at a great cost. Lastly, let's examine the use of Amen too. And the word Amen is actually a name, an intermediary figure in that egregor. Every time people say it, they invoke him. If you do rituals or spells and use Amen as some kind of closing word, you're effectively calling on that being. So be careful. 3. In short, if someone is inside this egregor and tries doing spells or conspiracies using its structure, the results can backfire. People often say they got even sicker after trying to heal themselves using its prayers or spells. That's quite common. It's also true that sometimes a person's personal willpower or their guardian angels are the ones actually helping them. Then people attribute that help to the egregor, which collects the credit and the energy. Meanwhile, it was never really involved. It was the person's own soul or their angels doing all the saving. Overall, from my perspective, any so-called help the egregor might give you is far outweighed by what it drains from you. It's much better to be self-sufficient, to learn to do things on your own, and not rely on deals with any external structure that will demand payback later. They never do anything for free. So that's all I wanted to share today about the experiences which Nadezhda Sonekhnaya shared with me about her baptism experience. If you want a deeper breakdown of the ritual itself and all its nuances, that's not really for YouTube. It's more for my website platform, since it goes into sensitive territory. But here on YouTube in my next video, I'll explain in detail how to annulate all and what not to do under any circumstances. I'll also talk about the serious consequences that can follow if you use certain risky methods. I love you all. Big hugs. See you soon. Yours. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share my channel. Become a member of my Telegram channel and discuss with like-minded people as a supporting club member.